What are carbon cap equivalents? Carbon cap equivalents are an alternative way of measuring a country's emissions reductions, rather than only just counting, say, economy-wide measures like a cap and trade program or a carbon tax to determine how many tons of carbon a country can commit to reducing in terms of its emissions. It counts complementary policies, such as provisions for decreasing emissions through aid to international forestry programs. How do carbon cap equivalents change thinking on U.S. emissions reduction efforts? Currently, the United States is proposing to reduce its emissions 17% below 2005 levels by 2020. When you compare this to what other countries are doing, the U.S. contribution is pretty small. It only amounts to really 1% of reductions below 1990 levels by 2020. If we look at the U.S. contribution, not only in terms of its economy-wide measure, the cap and trade program that's been proposed through the House legislation, and we count on the other provisions that they're willing to do, then in fact, their decreases in emissions go to something like 13% below 1990 levels by 2020, and as much as 21% below 1990 levels by 2020. Measured in this way, the U.S. actually meets the reductions that its allies is doing in terms of emissions reductions, rather than falling far below them as it's accused of doing now. How achievable are global emissions reductions goals? The global goal in terms of reducing emissions, as set by the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, is to cut global emissions by half by 2050. It's believed that if we do this, then we'll hold any increases in temperature to 2 degrees Celsius above pre-industrial levels. The contribution of developed countries to this goal is to cut emissions by 80% below 1990 levels by 2020. If we take a comprehensive measure, as CAP has done, of what all the developed countries and all the major emitters in the developing world, such as China, India, Brazil, South Africa, and Indonesia are doing, then it looks like if everyone does what they say they're going to do, we will achieve 65% of reductions needed to hit this global goal and hold temperature rise to 2 degrees above pre-industrial levels.